"We're canceling your birthday, Leah. Your sister needs us," my father stated flatly over the phone, while my mother sent a follow-up text reading, "You're the strong one." That cold, familiar sentence was the final push I needed. I packed 2 suitcases, stepped into the midnight rain, and severed every tie without leaving a note. 10 years later, when my weeping parents stood inside my glass-walled executive office begging the anonymous property owner to stop the foreclosure auction on their home, I slowly turned my chair around and whispered, "The strong one doesn't save enabling parents." My name is Leah Douglas. To understand why a single canceled birthday dinner became the catalyst that reshaped my entire life, you have to examine the subtle, toxic machinery of the Douglas household. Growing up in the coastal town of Highland Harbor, my family operated under an unspoken, rigid hierarchy. My younger sister, Maya, was treated as a delicate glass sculpture that required constant protection, while I was viewed as a piece of iron, expected to endure endless weight without ever cracking, complaining, or asking for basic support. My father, Terrence Douglas, was the founder and owner of Douglas Industrial Machinery, a mid-sized regional supplier that provided him with a comfortable income and an inflated sense of family authority. My mother, Martha, spent her days managing her social standing in local charitable clubs, obsessed with maintaining an image of affluent perfection. Both of my parents suffered from a severe emotional blindness when it came to Maya. From early childhood, Maya had mastered the art of weaponized vulnerability. Whenever the spotlight moved away from her, even for a fleeting moment, she would orchestrate a sudden, dramatic crisis, a failed school project, an exaggerated falling out with a classmate, or an unexplained physical ailment that brought my parents rushing to her bedside in a panic. Meanwhile, my accomplishments were met with cold indifference. When I graduated at the top of my high school class, Terrence offered a brief nod before returning to his newspaper, remarking that high marks were simply the bare minimum expected of an older child. When I won a prestigious state academic scholarship, Martha missed the award ceremony entirely because Maya was feeling anxious about a hairstyling appointment. Whenever I tried to express my feelings or point out the blatant hypocrisy, my mother would touch my shoulder with a patronizing sigh and offer her favorite justification. "You're the strong one, Leah. Maya is fragile. She needs our help, but you can take care of yourself." That single phrase was not a compliment. It was an emotional shield my parents used to justify neglecting me year after year. It allowed them to feel like compassionate, loving parents while pouring all their time, wealth, and affection into an insatiable, spoiled child. The breaking point arrived 10 years ago, exactly 3 days before my 20th birthday. For months, my parents had promised that this milestone would be different. They had agreed to host a simple dinner party at a cozy seafood bistro overlooking Highland Harbor, inviting a few close friends and extended relatives. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to believe that my father and mother were finally willing to see me as a daughter who deserved affection and celebration. However, 72 hours before the reservation, Maya realized that she was not going to be the center of attention. Maya, who was 18 at the time, suddenly manufactured a massive emotional emergency over an online college rejection letter, a college she had not even bothered to complete the application process for. She locked herself in her bedroom, throwing decorative items against the door, weeping loudly and declaring that her entire future was ruined. At 7 o'clock that evening, my phone rang in my bedroom. I picked it up, expecting my father to confirm the dinner head count with the restaurant. "Leah," Terrence said, his voice clipped, hurried and impatient, "we're canceling your birthday dinner. Maya is in an unmanageable emotional state right now and needs our full support. We're taking her on an emergency weekend retreat to a mountain resort to help her clear her mind." I stood frozen by my desk, feeling the room grow suddenly ice cold. "Dad, it's my 20th birthday. We've been planning this for 4 months. Can't you take her next week?" "Don't be so selfish, Leah," Terrence barked, his tone sharp with irritation. "Your sister is suffering. You're an adult. You can manage a birthday on your own. We'll make it up to you some other time." He disconnected the call without waiting for an answer. Seconds later, my phone chimed with a text message from Martha. I opened the screen to read 5 words that permanently severed my emotional connection to them. "You're the strong one, sweetie." I stared at those words on the glowing screen. There was no rage, no screaming, and no tears. Instead, a serene, absolute clarity settled over my mind. They were never going to love me. I was merely an afterthought, a convenient buffer in a family that existed solely to enable a manipulative girl. I walked over to my closet, pulled out 2 large duffel bags, and began packing. I packed my clothes, my personal identification, my academic documents, and the $2,800 I had saved from working part-time as a library assistant. At 2 in the morning, while my parents were downstairs comforting Maya over her fabricated crisis, I walked down the back stairs, stepped out into the pouring rain, and walked to the intercity bus station. I bought a one-way ticket to Boston, threw my phone's SIM card into a storm drain, and walked away forever. Arriving in Boston with less than $3,000 and 2 bags, I rebuilt my existence from absolute zero. I rented a tiny basement studio, worked night shifts as a data analyst, and put myself through Northeastern University, majoring in corporate finance and distressed debt restructuring. I worked 16 hours every single day, driven by an unshakable promise I had made to myself on that cold bus ride. I would build a life so secure, so powerful, that I would never need a single favor from anyone for as long as I lived. My sharp, analytical mind and relentless discipline quickly caught the attention of executive recruiters. After completing my degree with honors, I joined Vantage Bay Trust, a prestigious private equity firm specializing in commercial debt buyouts and institutional asset management. Over the next 7 years, I rose through the corporate ranks with unmatched precision. My ability to remain calm under pressure earned me the respect of institutional investors, eventually leading to my appointment as Chief Operating Officer and Managing Senior Partner at Apex Zenith Capital, an $80 million private investment trust. By my 29th year, I owned an elegant penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, drove an high-end executive sedan, and cultivated a tight circle of loyal, trustworthy colleagues. I was financially independent, emotionally composed, and completely at peace. Meanwhile, back in Highland Harbor, my disappearance did not bring my family closer together. It accelerated their financial ruin. Without my presence to serve as the quiet, resilient pillar of the household, Maya's toxic entitlement expanded without limits. Over the decade I was gone, Maya refused to maintain stable employment. Instead, she convinced our parents to finance 3 separate vanity business ventures: a high-end clothing boutique, an organic skincare line, and a boutique event planning firm. Every single business failed miserably within months due to Maya's total lack of discipline and absurd personal spending. Rather than holding Maya accountable, Terrence and Martha continuously covered her losses. Terrence mortgaged the family estate twice, drained his personal retirement funds, and eventually began taking out high-interest private commercial loans against Douglas Industrial Machinery to pay off Maya's credit card debts and legal liabilities. By the 10th year of my departure, Terrence's industrial supply firm was completely insolvent, and the primary mortgage on their family home was in severe default. Unbeknownst to my family, 8 months prior, Apex Zenith Capital, my firm, had acquired a $40 million regional portfolio of distressed residential and commercial mortgages from private banking syndicates. Included in that portfolio was the primary mortgage. the secondary line of credit, and the corporate debt notes for Douglas Industrial Machinery and 742 Crestview Manor, the home where I had grown up. When my risk assessment team flagged the account for immediate judicial foreclosure due to 18 consecutive months of non-payment, Terrence panicked. Realizing he was about to lose his business and his home, he frantically contacted the corporate office of Apex Zenith Capital, begging for an emergency audience with the anonymous managing senior partner to plead for a debt extension. I personally authorized the meeting. On a misty Tuesday morning in late October, exactly 10 years after I walked away, the heavy frosted glass doors of my executive suite on the 38th floor of Apex Zenith Tower opened. My executive assistant escorted Terrence, Martha, and Maya into the room. They stepped into the sunlit office looking completely weathered and desperate. Terrence looked 20 years older, his suit loose and worn, his posture slouched under the weight of crushing debt. Martha looked frail, her expensive jewelry replaced by cheap imitations, clutching her purse nervously. Standing behind them was Maya, now 28, dressed in an ill-fitting designer outfit, her face frozen in the same sour, entitled scowl she had carried since childhood. My executive leather chair was turned toward the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, offering a sweeping view of Boston Harbor. "Mr. Partner, ma'am, thank you for seeing us," Terrence began, his voice trembling with embarrassment and anxiety. "I am Terrence Douglas, founder of Douglas Industrial Machinery. We are facing a severe, unexpected financial hardship. Our home and my life's work are scheduled for public foreclosure auction next week." Martha took a step forward, her eyes brimming with tearful pleas. "Please, sir or ma'am, we are respectable people. Our youngest daughter, Maya, faced terrible, unforeseen market conditions in her business endeavors, and we simply used our personal equity to support her. We just need a temporary extension on our debt payments. We have nowhere else to go." I slowly set my teacup onto its saucer, letting the soft china clink echo across the silent room. I pressed the control button on my armrest, and my executive chair slowly rotated to face them. I looked my father, my mother, and my sister dead in the eyes. The air in the office turned instantly still. Martha let out a sharp, choked gasp, stumbling backward into Terrence. Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes bulging in sheer, paralyzed shock. "Leah!" she whispered, her voice cracking violently. Terrence froze, his face draining of every drop of color until he looked like a corpse. His jaw hung open as he stared at me, his hands shaking so hard he dropped his legal folder onto the carpet. "Leah! My God! Leah!" Maya gasped, her eyes scanning my tailored blazer, my diamond ear studs, and the pristine mahogany desk, her expression shifting from confusion to instant, bitter envy. I sat back in my chair, resting my hands palmly on the executive desk, my posture immaculate, my face a mask of absolute emotional detachment. "Hello, Terrence." "Hello, Martha," I said, my voice smooth, deep, and razor-sharp. "Leah! Oh, my baby!" Martha wailed, bursting into frantic tears as she stumbled toward my desk, reaching out her trembling arms. "You're alive! Where have you been? We searched everywhere for you. How could you abandon your family like that?" "Stay right where you are, Martha," I commanded in a calm, ice-cold tone. Martha stopped dead in her tracks, terrified by the sheer authority in my voice. "You didn't search for me," I said with quiet precision. "You filed a police inquiry that you canceled 10 days later because Maya wanted to go on a beach vacation. You never cared where I went because my absence meant one less person witnessing your foolishness." Terrence looked around the massive executive suite, his voice cracking into a desperate plea. "Leah, you run this firm. You are the senior partner of Apex Zenith Capital?" "I am. I built this firm from nothing. The same nothing you left me with when I walked out into the rain 10 years ago. Maya stepped forward, her voice instantly dropping into her usual whiny, demanding tone. Leah, this is insane. If you're super rich, you can just erase Dad's debt. You can fix our house. And honestly, you owe me a massive apology for disappearing and leaving me to deal with Mom and Dad's stress. I shifted my gaze onto Maya. My eyes were so cold, so utterly devoid of warmth, that Maya's voice trailed off and she took an involuntary step back. I owe you nothing, Maya, I said softly. You spent 10 years leeching off our parents, destroying their business, and living off their enablement. You are a 28-year-old parasite who never grew up because two weak people refused to give you boundaries. Terrence dropped onto his knees right on my office floor, weeping bitterly, his hands clasped together in pathetic desperation. Leah, please, my father sobbed. We were wrong. We made terrible mistakes. We were blind about Maya, and we were blind about you. Please, save our home. Don't put your mother and me on the streets. I leaned forward across my mahogany desk, looking down at my kneeling father. 10 years ago, Terrence, I called you 3 days before my 20th birthday. You canceled my dinner because Maya was throwing a tantrum. And when I asked you to reconsider, you called me selfish. Martha wept hysterically, wringing her hands as she looked up at me. Leah, please, remember what I always told you? You were always the strong one. A subtle cold smile touched my lips. You were right, Martha. I am the strong one. And do you know what the strong one does? They all stared at me in breathless, terrified silence. The strong one doesn't save parents who ruined themselves to enable a toxic child. I stated with absolute finality. The strong one enforces justice. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. Harrison, send in security and corporate legal. Within 10 seconds, Harrison Blake, my chief legal counsel, entered the room with 2 uniformed security officers. Harrison, I instructed, my voice unwavering, proceed with the immediate judicial foreclosure of 742 Crestview Manor. No debt extensions, no restructuring, no mercy. Put the property on the public auction block next week. No, Leah, please, Martha shrieked, dropping to her knees beside Terrence, sobbing uncontrollably. Furthermore, I added, looking down at my family, execute immediate commercial asset seizure on Douglas Industrial Machinery to satisfy outstanding institutional default claims. Terrence buried his face in his hands, letting out a gut-wrenching wail of total defeat. Security, escort these people off my floor, I commanded softly. The security guards firmly took Terrence, Martha, and Maya by their arms, lifting them up and leading them out of my executive suite. Their desperate screams, sobbing apologies, and bitter cries echoed down the corridor until the double doors clicked shut, restoring absolute, beautiful peace to my office. The fallout was swift, absolute, and total. The Douglas family estate was sold at public auction a week later. Deprived of their home, their wealth, and their business, Terrence and Martha were forced to move into a small, subsidized one-bedroom rental on the outskirts of the state. Terrence, completely broken by his own failures, was forced to take an entry-level clerk job at a local hardware store in his late 60s to pay for basic groceries. Maya, realizing her parents had 0 resources left to enable her, was finally forced to face reality. Unable to manipulate her way into luxury, she took a low-level retail job, living in a cramped studio apartment, her dreams of unearned status permanently shattered. Meanwhile, my life continued to flourish in an era of unshakable peace, prosperity, and purpose. Free from the emotional weight of a toxic past, I expanded Apex Zenith Capital while establishing the Leah Douglas Foundation, a multi-million-dollar charitable trust providing university scholarships, emergency shelter, and legal guidance for young women escaping neglectful households. Sitting on the balcony of my Boston penthouse, watching the sun set over the harbor, holding my head high, I knew that true strength isn't proven by enduring abuse. It is proven by walking away, building your own empire, and letting justice prevail.